In the late 1600s, the Massachusetts colony was severely isolated. Wars with the Wabanaki Confederacy forced traumatized refugees southward into fragile settlements. This influx collided with a brutal winter. Displaced families created a severe geographic and economic bottleneck at Salem. The settlers, interpreting these hardships, operated under a strict Puritan theology. They believed in a literal, physical devil, actively trying to destroy their Bible-based society. Because women were viewed culturally as having weaker, unprotected souls, they were considered the primary targets for demonic possession. These intense external pressures fractured Salem village. Neighbors engaged in bitter disputes over property lines and grazing rights. The tension was actively inflamed by their minister, Reverend Samuel Parris, whose stark and unforgiving leadership style demanded public penance for minor infractions. Salem functioned as a deeply stressed, fractured society, where neighborly paranoia laid the groundwork for a catastrophic legal failure. In early 1692, 9-year-old Betty Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams began experiencing sudden, violent fits. They screamed, threw objects, and contorted themselves into unnatural positions. The local physician could find no physical evidence of any known disease. Modern researchers have proposed that these physical symptoms could have been caused by convulsive ergotism, a biological reaction to eating rye bread infected by a fungus that thrives in damp, cold conditions. But in 1692, the diagnosis was supernatural. Pressed for answers, the girls accused 3 marginalized local women of tormenting them: a destitute mother named Sarah Good, an elderly widow named Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, an enslaved woman. During her public interrogation, Tituba made a calculated choice. Instead of denying the charges, she gave the magistrates exactly what they suspected. She confessed to serving the devil, weaving detailed stories of dark rituals and claiming that other colonists were already part of a massive demonic conspiracy. The local magistrates accepted Tituba's confession as fact. By keeping her alive as a crucial witness, they sent a clear message. The only way to survive official scrutiny was to confess and point a finger at someone else. Tituba's coerced testimony transformed a localized medical anomaly into a legally recognized, state-investigated conspiracy. By May of 1692, dozens of people were languishing in disease-ridden jails. Facing a logistical crisis, the newly arrived governor, William Phips, ordered the creation of a special court of oyer and terminer to process the massive backlog of prisoners. He appointed Chief Magistrate William Stoughton to lead the proceedings. Stoughton drove an aggressive, uncompromising prosecutorial stance, determined to purge the colony of invisible enemies. To secure convictions, Stoughton's court relied heavily on spectral evidence. The magistrates ruled that if an afflicted person claimed to see the specter of a neighbor attacking them, that vision was admissible in court as legal proof of a pact with the devil. This standard of evidence created an impossible trap for the accused. The court offered them 2 paths: confess to witchcraft and name accomplices to spare your own life, or maintain your innocence, face the spectral visions of the accusers, and hang. The Court of Oyer and Terminer's procedural rules actively incentivized perjury, weaponizing the law against the community rather than establishing the truth. As the trials accelerated through the summer, the profile of the accused shifted. The accusations moved past the village outcasts and targeted upstanding, covenanted church members, including a respected grandmother named Rebecca Nurse. The chaos provided cover for settling old scores. Long-standing disputes over property lines, inheritances, and grazing rights were resolved rapidly once rival families began accusing each other of witchcraft. Official authority endorsed the frenzy. In September, an 81-year-old farmer named Giles Corey was brought before the judges. Recognizing the court as illegitimate, Corey refused to enter a plea of either guilty or not guilty. By remaining silent, he ensured his trial could not legally proceed, protecting his estate from being confiscated by the crown. The judges responded with peine forte et dire, an archaic legal torture designed to force a plea. Over the course of 2 days, heavy stones were piled onto Corey's chest. He refused to speak, dying under the crushing weight. 19 people had been executed by hanging, and 1 tortured to death. The bloodshed and the public torture of an elderly man pushed the community's terror past the point of compliance, shattering public faith in the magistrates. By late 1692, prominent clergymen began publicly questioning the proceedings. Leading the charge was Increase Mather, an influential minister who scrutinized the court's reliance on visions and dreams. Through published texts, Mather circulated a strict theological argument against the trials. It is better for suspected witches to escape than for one innocent person to die. The primary target of his critique was the court's use of spectral evidence. As public and political pressure mounted, Governor Phipps stepped in. In October, he ordered the executions to stop, dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer, and established a new Superior Court of Judicature to hear the remaining cases in early 1693. This new court operated under one critical mandate: a strict, uncompromising ban on the admission of spectral evidence. Dreams and visions were no longer recognized as legal proof. Without dream logic to sustain the accusations, the remaining cases collapsed. The new proceedings resulted in a wave of immediate acquittals, dismissals, and pardons. The panic evaporated. The collapse of the panic followed the removal of the specific rules of evidence that sustained it, identifying the crisis as one of jurisprudence rather than a sudden shift in public belief. The survivors stepped out of the jails into a bleak reality. Families were left destitute from seized properties and prison fees. Their executed relatives had been denied proper burials, cast into shallow, unmarked graves at a site known as Proctor's Ledge. Healing took decades. Former jurors signed documents begging for forgiveness. In 1706, Anne Putnam Jr., one of the most active child accusers, stood before her congregation and publicly apologized, stating she had been deluded into denouncing innocent people. The legal system slowly attempted to correct the record. In 1702, the Massachusetts General Court declared the 1692 trials officially unlawful. By 1711, the legislature passed a bill reversing the convictions of most victims and authorizing financial compensation for their families. Yet the names of several victims remained legally tarnished for centuries. It took persistent legislative efforts to clear the final few, culminating in 2022, 330 years after the trials, when Elizabeth Johnson Jr. became the last convicted Salem witch to be officially exonerated. That 3-century span of apologies and pardons highlights the extreme fragility of due process. It shows how quickly isolated, fearful communities can turn to scapegoating when under pressure, and how difficult it is to repair the damage. Salem stands as a cautionary record of the lethal cost to a society when fear and social division override the rule of law.